Let's be real. Nothing stings more than giving your heart to someone who treated it like it was optional. You showed up. You cared. You gave more than you probably should have. And what did he do? He got comfortable. He assumed you'd always be there. But here's the truth. Being taken for granted is a reflection of how someone sees you, not a reflection of your actual worth. And the most powerful move you can make right now isn't begging for his attention. It's becoming someone he no longer has access to. This isn't about playing games. It's about shifting your focus from proving your value to living it. And when you do that, trust me, his ego won't know what hit it. Let's talk about how to turn his comfort into regret. Not by trying to get him back, but by becoming someone he'll wish he'd never lost. When someone takes you for granted, the instinct is often try harder, to prove your value, to remind them what they're missing, to re-engage them with more attention, more kindness, more of your energy. But here's the harsh truth. The more you give to someone who's not valuing it, the less they feel they have to earn it. That's where things go sideways, because attention without boundaries doesn't breed love. It breeds entitlement. When someone believes you'll always be there no matter how they treat you, they stop showing up, they stop trying, they stop appreciating, and in their mind, the cost of losing you starts to feel low. Not because you aren't valuable, but because you haven't acted like someone who knows their value. That's why pulling back your energy is one of the most powerful moves you can make when you've been taken for granted. And it's not about manipulation. It's not about making someone chase you. It's about preserving your self-respect. It's about stepping back so you can see clearly, and so they can see what they've risked losing. Silence, in these moments, becomes your power, because the space you create by stepping back allows reality to set in. It gives the other person a chance to feel the weight of your absence, rather than the convenience of your presence. And more importantly, it gives you the clarity you've been missing, the chance to step out of the emotional fog and actually ask, what do I want? What do I deserve? And why am I holding on so tightly to someone who isn't holding me at all? Here's something most people don't realizing. When you're always available, always texting, always showing up, you train the other person to expect that as a baseline, even when they're giving you the bare minimum. That's not connection. That's conditioning. And when you finally stop feeding the dynamic, when you don't respond with that same immediacy, when you stop volunteering your attention and affection like it's endless, that's when the ego starts to twitch. Not because they miss you in some deep, soulful way, at least not yet, but because the supply they got so used to suddenly isn't there anymore. That loss of control, that silence, that's where regret begins. You don't need to post cryptic quotes or start flirting with someone else to get their attention. You don't need to perform confidence. Just be gone, quietly, calmly, with no drama and no parting shots. People notice real withdrawal more than any dramatic exit, because drama still gives them something to react to. Silence forces them to sit with their own behavior. And as they sit with it, if there's any emotional depth in them at all, they'll start to reflect. They'll question. They'll wonder why you didn't chase this time. And that wondering, that's the first crack in their ego. That's where the power dynamic flips. But here's the key. Don't pull back hopping to get a reaction. Don't go silent just to manipulate an outcome. Pull back because your energy is valuable, and you finally realized it's been spent in the wrong place. So reclaim your power by stepping out of the noise. Don't argue. Don't overexplain. At some point, you have to stop being shocked by how someone treats you and start asking yourself why you keep accepting it. That's where rebuilding your standards comes in. It's not enough to say you want respect, consistency, love. You have to enforce those things by how you respond when they're missing. The problem isn't always that someone crossed a line. It's that you erased the line for them. Maybe you made excuses. Maybe you gave one more chance, then another. And every time you did, you sent a quiet messaging. You can keep doing this. I'll stay. Standards are not about being demanding or cold. They're not ultimatums. They're about knowing what you need to feel safe, loved, respected. And they're not budging on those things just because someone is charming, attractive, or temporarily giving you attention. If a man knows that you'll keep lowering the bar just to keep him around, why would he ever rise to meet it? Why would he show up differently if he already gets to keep you by doing the bare minimum? There's a moment in every relationship, or almost relationship, where you feel the shift. That gut feeling that says, this isn't right. I'm being treated like an option. This doesn't feel good anymore. That's your inner voice trying to protect you. But instead of listening, most people override it with hope. You want it to be what it used to be. You tell yourself it'll go back to the beginning. You cling to potential, and in doing so, you start lowering your standards without even realizing it. You go from, I want someone who shows up for me, to, I just want him to text me back. That's not love. That's survival mode. Rebuilding your standards means returning to yourself. It means writing down clearly what you will and will not accept, and then sticking to it, even when it's hard, even when your heart wants to compromise, even when it means letting go of someone you thought would stay. Because every time you uphold a standard, you reinforce your self-worth. You teach yourself that you are the kind of person who doesn't beg, doesn't chase, and doesn't settle for breadcrumbs. Of course, it's uncomfortable at first. You'll have moments where you wonder if you were too harsh, too quick to cut someone off. But remind yourself having standards doesn't make you high maintenance. It makes you someone who's no longer willing to overextend herself for people who undeliver. You're not punishing anyone by walking away. You're protecting your peace. And that's the shift. That's when the dynamic changes. And here's the twist: the moment you start living by higher standards, people will notice. Some will fall away, and that's good. Let them. They were never meant for the version of you who knows her worth. But others, the ones who are emotionally mature, respectful, intentional, will rise to meet you. Because standards don't just repel the wrong people, they attract the right ones. The man who took you for granted. He was allowed to because your boundaries were flexible. But when you stop negotiating your value, when you let your actions reflect your words, you stop becoming the woman he could take for granted and start becoming the woman he regrets losing. Not because you yelled louder or fought harder, but because you stopped giving him access to a version of you that didn't know how much she was worth. There's this idea that the best way to make someone regret losing you is to replace them, to show off a new relationship, to move on fast, to make it clear you're winning. Now, but real power doesn't come from trying to make someone jealous. It comes from the quiet confidence of leveling up your life in a way that has nothing to do with them. Because here's the true thing: if he took you for granted, it's because at some point, he assumed you needed him more than he needed you. And when that dynamic sets in, the only way to shift it is not by proving your value to him, but by fully stepping into your value for yourself. Leveling up isn't about changing who you are to become someone better. In his eyes, it's about reconnecting with who you were before you started shrinking yourself to fit what he wanted. Before you started walking on eggshells, dimming your light, tolerating inconsistency just to keep the connection alive. Somewhere along the way, your world may have started to revolve around him, his mood, his attention, his texts. And now, the shift is about realigning with your own center, about waking up and deciding, I'm done building someone else up at the expense of myself. When you level up for you, when you focus on your growth, your peace, your purpose, something changes in the energy you give off. You stop asking, will he text? And start asking, what am I building today? You stop obsessing over what he's thinking and start falling back in love with your own life. That's not a performance. That's transformation. It's when you start showing up differently. more grounded, more focused, more fulfilled, that people begin to feel your absence in a real way. Because it's not just your presence they miss, it's the energy you used to give so freely, the attention you used to pour into them, the access they had to you without effort. When that access disappears and they see you evolving, when they realize your happiness no longer depends on them, that's when the regret creeps in, not because you posted a glow-up picture or went out with someone else, but because you stopped orbiting around their life. They see you doing things they never thought you'd do, thriving, laughing again, and suddenly they realizing they were never the source of your light. They were just standing in the way of it. But let's be clear, leveling up has to be real. It can't be something you're doing with one eye still on them, hoping they notice. If your growth is performative, it won't stick. If it's authentic, it'll change your life, whether they ever come back or not. The goal isn't to get them back. The goal is to become so whole that you're no longer even asking whether they'll come back. This is where your power lies, not in reacting to how someone else treated you, but in deciding how you treat yourself moving forward. You start investing in your body, your mind, your career, your passions, not because you want to show them what they lost, but because you finally realize what you were losing by settling for less. And ironically, that's exactly when they'll start to feel the loss. Because nothing haunts the ego more than the person who walked away and started building a life they could never have been part of. Not because they weren't wanted, but because they didn't do the work to stay. There comes a point where you have to stop fighting to be seen, heard, and chosen. When someone takes you for granted, it's easy to fall into the trap of trying to prove your worth, to convince them that you're valuable, that you deserve their attention, their effort, their love. You start overgiving, over-explaining, and over-investing in hopes that they'll finally wake up and treat you the way you deserve. But the more you try to prove your worth, the more power you hand over to someone who's already shown you they don't know how to handle it. And that's when the cycle begins. The more you chase validation from someone who's emotionally unavailable, the more you forget that you never needed their approval to begin with. When someone consistently fails to show up for you, emotionally, mentally, or physically, and you respond by trying harder, you're not building a connection, you're building a one-sided performance. You start molding yourself into what you think they want. You become afraid to speak up, afraid to walk away, afraid to stop being the cool girl who's low maintenance and always understanding. And in the process, you start losing the very things that made you magnetic in the first place: your confidence, your boundaries, your sense of self, the weight of your absence. You don't have to perform to be loved. The right person doesn't need you to prove anything. They don't need you to minimize your needs or pretend you're okay with less just to keep the peace. They want you as you are, in your wholeness, your clarity, and your standards. But when you've been taken for granted, it can start to feel like love is something you have to earn, like attention is a reward for being good enough. That's not love. That's emotional scarcity, and it keeps you locked in a loop of overgiving and under-receiving. The real shift happens when you decide to stop chasing someone's recognition and start paying attention to who's actually showing up for you. Not just with words, but with actions. You begin to ask better questions: who's consistent? Who respects my time? Who makes me feel safe and valued? And just as importantly, who am I when I'm not performing? When you stop trying to win someone back and start focusing on who's trying to win you, your entire energy changes. You go from, I hope he picks me, is he even worthy of access to me? That's the moment the power dynamic flips. Because when someone has taken you for granted, they're not used to you looking elsewhere. They're used to being the center of your emotional world, the one you revolve around. But when your attention shifts inward, when you start nurturing your peace, your goals, your worth, they feel that vacuum, and the ego hates being replaced. It hates realizing that you stopped needing it to feel good about yourself. But here's the catch. This transformation only works when it's real. You can't fake self-worth. You can't half commit to healing and still secretly hope he notices. You have to truly choose Eeyore without making it a performance for him to watch. When you do, you stop looking for crumbs and start expecting the full meal. And suddenly his effort, or lack thereof, stops feeling personal. You're no longer waiting for him to see your worth, because you finally see it yourself. That's the beginning of the end for his ego, because there's nothing more unsettling to someone who took you for granted than realizing you don't need. When someone has grown used to your presence, your kindness, your patience, your loyalty, they often stop recognizing its value. It becomes expected, assumed, routine. That's what taking someone for granted really is, not seeing the gift of what you offer, because they believe it will always be there. And when that happens, your instinct might be to say something, to confront it, to demand change. But here's the thing, when words haven't worked, when you've explained yourself over and over, when your hurt has been dismissed or minimized, the most powerful thing you can do is walk away quietly. Letting someone feel the weight of losing you isn't about revenge or punishment. It's about finally refusing to carry the emotional load of making the relationship work on your own. You don't need to yell, cry, or post anything for them to see what they lost. You just need to go. And not in a dramatic, attention-seeking way, but in a self-assured, peaceful way that makes it clear, I'm done handing myself to someone who doesn't know how to hold me. There's something deeply unsettling to the ego when someone who always showed up just stops. Not with anger, not with games, just a calm, quiet exit that leaves no room for negotiation. You don't text, you don't check in, you don't try to explain one more time. You give them the silence they never thought you'd give. And in that silence, something happens. Without your voice, your energy, your presence, they're left with only one thing: themselves. And that's when reality starts to settle in. People often don't realize what they had until they can no longer access it, until they go to text and see no reply, until they scroll through your profile and notice the shift, until their phone is quiet and your name is nowhere in it. And it's not that you're trying to make them miss you. That's not the point. The point is that you're done managing their experience. You're done softening your exit just to protect their comfort. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to close the door with no announcement, no final speech, no emotional performance. Just a clear, firm decision to no longer participate in something that diminishes your worth. That kind of exit doesn't feel satisfying at first. It feels unfamiliar. You might even question if it was the right move, especially when they don't immediately react. But don't mistake their silence for indifference. The ego doesn't process loss instantly. It takes time, it takes space, and most importantly, it takes the absence of the thing it used to feed on. What they remember isn't always your last words. It's the feeling of your energy disappearing, the texts they expected that never came, the reassurance they once relied on now gone, the emotional safety net you used to provide, no longer there to catch them. That's when regret begins. Not when you beg for change, but when you stop giving them the space to keep disappointing you. And the best part is, by removing yourself, you're no longer waiting on their growth to start yours. You're no longer dependent on their behavior to feel peace. You've taken the power back by choosing yourself, not as a reaction to their neglect, but as a long overdue return to self-respect. You're no longer the person who keeps trying to fix what's broken. You're the person who recognizes when something doesn't serve you and walks away with grace. That's what stays with them. There's a reason people say you never know what you've got until it's gone. But it's not just about absence. It's about who you become once you've left. When someone takes you for granted, they assume access. They assume you'll always be there, always check in, always leave the door cracked open just in case they decide to come back. And as long as that door stays open, they don't have to feel the finality of losing you. That's why truly being the one who got away means more than walking away. It means meaning it up. It means closing the chapter with no bookmarks saved. Being the one who got away isn't about holding on to the hope that he'll come crawling back. It's about moving forward so completely that even if he does, he finds himself looking at a version of you he no longer recognizes, because you've evolved into someone who no longer needs what he was offering. That's what really turns regret into something he has to sit with. Not that you left, but that you outgrew him. That the version of you who have fought to stay is gone. And that the new version, she doesn't wait for breadcrumbs. She expects full meals. The mistake so many people make after walking away is keeping the emotional door ajar, checking in, stalking his posts, lingering in hope, even if they say they're done. But being truly done is a decision you make not just in words, but in energy. You stop looking back. You stop fantasizing about a version of him that never really existed. You stop holding space for someone who never made room for you. And when you make that shift, when you finally stop needing closure or apologies or one last conversation, that's when you become the one who got away and never looked back. And here's where the regret sinks in for him. It's not just that you left. It's that you got better. That you're glowing differently now. You're laughing without bitterness. You're focused, ambitious, grounded. You're attracting better people. You're not bitter or stuck. You're free. And in that freedom, there's something deeply unsettling to someone who thought they'd always have a place in your life. They start asking questions they never thought they'd need to ask you. Was I really that blind? Did I really lose her for good? Would she even take me back now? And if you've truly moved on, the answer is no. Not because you're punishing them, but because you've evolved past the version of yourself that would have accepted less. The irony is that by the time the regret hits, it's too late. You're not waiting. You're not performing. You're not proving. You're living. And maybe he does come back. Maybe he sends the text, makes the call, suddenly remembers everything he forgot when you were right in front of him. But by then, your life is fuller, your peace is stronger, and the urge to go back to something that once made you feel small just isn't there anymore. You're not angry. You're not holding a grudge. You've just changed. And in that transformation, you become unforgettable. Not because you stayed, but because you finally left with finality. You stopped circling the same lesson, and you turned it into growth. That's the version of you he didn't see coming. The version who didn't just get away. She grew away. And no matter how much he regrets it, some people only get one version of you. He had his chance, he lost it. And now you're gone, for good. Here's a powerful and emotionally grounded conclusion to your speech in the same confident, empathetic, and growth-focused tone as Matthew Hussey. So if he took you for granted, let that be the last time anyone ever does. Not because you became colder, harder, or more guarded, but because you became wiser. You stopped pouring yourself into people who didn't know how to hold you. You stopped begging to be seen and started seeing yourself. That shift, it changes everything. Let his ego deal with the silence, with the loss, with the reality that you were never the problem. You were the opportunity he didn't value. And by the time he realizes it, you won't be the same woman he once knew. You'll be stronger, clearer, more at peace, and no longer looking back. Because this isn't about getting him to regret it. It's about making sure you never regret staying too long where you weren't appreciated. Walk away, hold your head high, and let your life speak for you. That's how you turn being taken for granted into a lesson they never forget.